Alright, so I've had this guitar for a few days now, and I decided to take my Saturday off from the channel and I was like, I'm just going to unplug and just do my own thing. And after I played a video game for a little while, and I was like, what do I want to do? I wanted to play this guitar. So I came into my studio and played it for a couple hours and was super enjoying it, but that wonky tuning peg was bent. So I was like, I'm just going to start working on this, not for the channel, but just for me, because I just really think this guitar is super cool. And so I didn't video any of it, but I can run down what ended up happening is that I ended up spending my whole Saturday just working on this guitar and ended up just doing the total restoration all in one shot, and super enjoyed it. I really enjoy doing this stuff, and genuinely. So I will run down very quickly first the 6 points that I did to this, and then I'll take you through each one in more detail. So number 1 is I put new tuners on it. We'll start at the head and work down, put new tuners on it. We'll talk about that in more detail. Number 2 is I spent some time, these are very interesting, so stay tuned to hear about the tale of these pickups. They're very, very unusual. And so I potted them and extra grounded them and so forth, so I got a story about that. I also worked on reinforcing the body because I discovered this is a true hollow body. This does not have a center block. It is not a semi. It's a true hollow body. I also have been working on the body in terms of getting the finish restored and working on some laminate cracks there and so forth. So I've been working on the body. I'll walk you through what I did to restore the body. And another thing is restoring this very, very weird bridge. And we'll talk about it. It's a very, very strange bridge. I've been spending some time just looking at images online of bridges to try to find something similar to this, and I have not yet found it. And then I converted the tailpiece from a tremolo system, a kind of a semi-Bigsby style, to a trapeze straight through hardtail. So that's what I've done to it, and I will run you through each of the steps. So point number 1 on Fran here, Fran from Japan, is that I replaced the tuners. And I wasn't initially intending to, but I knew that it might be a possibility because one of the tuners was like really, really bent. And there was actually 2 that were bent. I was able to successfully bend one of them back after I disassembled the tuners, took them all apart. They're open style, so very easy to disassemble. I disassembled them. I got one straightened out, but the one that was severely bent broke. And here's the pieces of it here, the shaft that broke. So, whatever, no worries. I pulled out, I had already bought this actually for, I'm still planning to do some work on this IYV Big Jazz Box. Beautiful guitar. Check out my reviews on that. Ironically, I compared this to a Birdland mainly because of the cutaway and the shape and just the overall, aesthetic of it. But this is actually, in some respects, closer because it's actually a thin line. This is super thin, and as we'll talk about, it's a true hollow body. But anyway, so back to the tuners. So I was planning to restore them because I'm trying to just restore as best I can in this resto mod, but some, stuff happens, and that one broke, so no problem. I already had these tuners that I was contemplating putting into there, and they are Music Lily Pro, so they're the slightly upscale, they're Grover style, and I've had good experience with Music Lily. And when you're browsing their products, you can usually find a regular level product and then something marked Pro, which is a little bit step up. And it's usually just a few bucks more to go to the Pro, and there really is a definable quality improvement. Even the regular stuff has tended to be good, and they're not sponsoring me to say any of this. So these are just my own thoughts. I've done a lot of mods over the years, and Music Lily is a solid company. They have a working relationship with Wilkinson and so forth. So put those on there. Now this, I had to convert it from the open style vintage through. The hole was not as big, and so I had to bore out the holes for the tuners And to do that, I started to get my drill bit out, and I was like, I don't want to put that much stress on this. This is a multiple piece of wood, you can see there. And I didn't want to put, this old guitar through that much stress. So I took the slower route and used a small sanding bit on my Dremel. I've got my snake Dremel here that is my go-to for almost everything that I do, other than screw driving and basic drilling. But wonderful tool. So I gently worked them out and opened them up, and I had to re-drill because I had a set of semi-enclosed that I was going to swap in to maintain the same basic style, but the holes did not quite match. They were close, but they weren't identical, and so I didn't want to re-drill, and a couple of the screws when I was taking them out of the old broke off, the head broke off, so I just filled those holes in and just re-tapped new holes. My process for this style, because you have the top that screws into the shaft, is to get them aligned, get them on there and aligned exactly how you want it, and then tap just a little bit, tap your hole with a small drill point, and then put your, and just, it's always, my rule is always to take your time and just, be gentle with it. That's always my rule for restoration. So that was my process of getting these new tuners in, and now they are solid. I've been playing with it this morning and last night after finishing all of this, and much better tuning stability. The other ones were just, they're 60 years old and bent. So this era of Japanese guitars, generally speaking, do not come with serial numbers on it. The only identification of it being made in Japan is on the plate, on the back plate of the neck. And these were made to be rebranded. This comes from Matsumoto. They could rebrand it. So this was rebranded in terms of they could send a crate of these to a music distributor, and then they could pop their headstock plate on there, and you're good to go. You've got a branded guitar. So the reason, without the serial number, we don't have exact dates and that sort of thing. And really, like serial numbers with dating and all of that, it's a whole thing. So we don't know exactly when this one was developed. Sometime between 1965 and mid-70s, 75 or so, because this is a pre-lawsuit era design. Now, I was able to narrow that down. So the seller just said probably like 70s guitar. So I was able to narrow this down because I did some forum work, and I found a whole forum dedicated to this factory and generation of guitars and various stuff. And I browsed the forums, and I finally found there's a distinction, because so they started making these in 1965, and they had not yet hammered out their actual humbucker design for this, but they wanted this to be a humbucker guitar. So they designed the guitar to accommodate humbuckers, but they didn't have them designed yet. They didn't have a finished product they were ready to produce. So what they did was they put a single coil in here, and they disguised it as a humbucker. So to look at it, this looks like an HH. It looks like twin humbuckers. But you take this off, and even the back, there's a metal plate on the back, so you just glance at it and you say, oh yeah, it's a humbucker. Aha, but it is not. There's also a little hole in the back, and you could stick something in there and it's absolutely empty. And you can even hear, it's an old trick for like tapping drywall, to find where the studs are as you're listening for that different echo. It's empty, and I confirmed that it was empty and dug around in there and so forth. So these are actually single coils with the screw poles. So adjustable poles, but they are in a plastic humbucker case. Very, very unusual. Very unusual. And they only made these for a couple years while they were getting their humbucker, and then they phased this out and the rest of the line. So this actually demonstrates that it is probably a 1965 to 67-ish. I think they went through selling them into like 68 or something. So mid to late 60s. This is actually a little bit older than I initially thought, and again, it's that peculiar design. Now, that also means that being an older single coil, that it had a lot of noise, and it did. There's a lot of hum, there's a lot of noise, and you get feedback, because as we'll talk about in just a minute, I also discovered it's a hollow body. It's a true hollow body. So the answer to this was to pot them. And so what that entailed was the candle method, which, I've got that guitar repair guide. If you guys are into doing any kind of guitar work yourself, this is the book to get, honestly. This is my go-to for all things guitar repair, and it's awesome. He talks about the reason why you actually want to use a candle if you're going to do this yourself in a non-factory setting. Use a candle and pot it by, dripping the wax in to seal the back of the pickup. And so not only did I do that, I did a multiple phase thing where I did that. I potted it nice and deep, and then I've been using for various stuff. I got these basswood poly sheets there, and they're, for being so thin, they're quite tough stuff. Very light, but very tough. And so I cut one just the size of the inside of the cavity there, put it in there on top of the wax potting, and I also heavily put this conductive tape. And I got it just sized right so that the outside where the screws go in, which is part of the grounding, it's all copper in this actually, and anyway, I cut it just the right size so that the tape would also run up against that, so it also added some more grounding, and it gave rear conductive shielding, and then I potted over that again. And so now we've got this sandwich of wax, conductive plate with the basswood, and then wax again on the back, and so now it's fully filled in, and it greatly reduced the noise. And it allowed, I've been messing around with different distortion stuff, much less feedback as a result. So that was a big success.